All right, everybody. Hello, welcome to the first edition of what we are calling Text to Table. Yeah. And that the idea behind Text to Table is right now we are in a time where race in this country and across the world is top of mind to everyone. And in the digital age that we're in, most people are communicating via text or group chat. So there's a lot of conversations happening between group chats now. And the idea of Text to Table is to bring those conversations to our virtual table. Well, we'll introduce ourselves in just a minute, but I wanted to give some background just before you even know who we are, how we got here. So what you're looking at are 4 Black CEOs of various organizations of different sizes, of different influences, and different locations. And the events of the last couple of weeks, for many people, you know, we've all been dealing with it in different ways. And I think you'll see when we have this conversation here, which, by the way, this is a conversation. We have our drinks to make it official. What you'll see here is that we, being Black leaders, we all have experienced the events and the conversations around in similar ways and in different ways. And we're having conversations with each other. We're having conversations with other people. And a big part of how we move forward is we have to bring these conversations to light and get them out of the group chats and get it into more public discourse. So that's the concept of what we're doing. And one thing is, this is not going to be the well-polished webinar you've seen everywhere. This is going to keep it real, keep it live. For context, we wanted to be very casual in this, just to display in solidarity. My girl Michelle, who you meet in a minute, this is her version of casual. Still looking sharp.
Short sleeve.
even on casual. And as background, one of the things that when we were even talking about doing this, what I suggested is that we sort of introduce ourselves in the context of being Black, as opposed to the traditional introductions. But Shawn, you made a good point about before we do that, even the significance of the 4 of us on this Zoom right now. Tell me about that point you were making.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that you have, as you noted already, 4 Black association CEOs, but then you have 4 association fellows, and you also have a person who formerly served on, an association board, a person who was recently appointed to an association board, another person who's serving on a university board, as well as her local association board. So just to provide the full context of the 4 of us, it's important to point this out because there aren't that many of us. And for many people, they look to us for guidance. They see us as role models. So in this moment, the tenor of the country, we did not have the luxury of separating our personal from professional lives. It all kind of just converged because of who we are, the roles that we have in our respective associations, as well as the association community overall. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind as we continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm. I think what you pointed out, sorry to cut you off, Irving, but that is like so poignant because we communicate about personal and professional all the time, but watching that collide through what's been transpiring in the world has just been where these text-to-table conversations are valid and needed, because if we didn't have that text outlet, I don't even know how, at least for me, I would have got through that week, or I wouldn't even have the encouragement to be forward, even be having this conversation today. So I think it goes back to just what we represent, the 4 of us, how long we've been doing this. This is not like our first job, and just really what the importance in the historical context of us being here is. And I think now more than ever, that's become so important and just at the forefront. And it's been a proud moment. Definitely.
And I'll just piggyback on that also, because as you pointed out, Michelle, this is not our first time doing this, which also means we've experienced a lot, right, in these roles, and some of the things that are coming to light, that are happening to people, or people are uncovering or discovering, as far as, these microaggressions and race issues, we've kind of had to deal with ourselves, even as being Black leaders, so it is really important to, that context is really important, as you point out. Like, it's great that we can celebrate ourselves and the success that we've had in being minorities in these roles that a lot of minorities don't serve, but we also have to deal with, a lot of the stuff that's happening now in the world, or we have had to deal with it as well, and haven't had the opportunity to talk vocally or be vocal about it. We've just had to deal with it and keep pushing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all, we keep saying we, but people don't know who we are. We broke all the rules of like how you host a conversation. So how about we dive into that? Like who the we are? Shawn, you were about to make a comment, so why don't you say who the we is and then make the comment?
I'm Shawn Boynes. I'm based here in the DC metro area, and I've worked in the association management community for 25 years. Long time, right?
You saw we just let that pause go. Right? 25 years, if you didn't know. 25
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Michelle?
I'm Michelle Mills Clement. I am in Chicago, born and raised in Chicago, spent about 5 years on the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. I'm the CEO of a large trade association here, and I've been in association management. I keep saying 15 years, but I feel like I've been saying 15 years for the last 5 years. I don't think I'm at 20.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm at 20, so I might be at like maybe close 16, 17 years, but definitely made it a career move and just, love it's a hidden gem. So I always tell people I'm overly pushing for association management work.
Donté?
I'm Donté Shannon. I'm originally from Rock Hill, South Carolina. Rock Hill stand up. Spent some time in LA, leading an organization there, and am now the CEO of the Association for Equipment Management Professionals. I'm based in Washington, DC. I'm also an account exec at AMP Association Management. I've been in association management for 13 years. Every January it re-ups for me. So
that's easy.
January 2021, it'll be 14 years.
And I am Irving Washington. I am a CEO of a media-based association. I have been in associations, nonprofits for over 15 years now as well, too. So some similar backgrounds that you're seeing here as well as different ones. All right, y'all, so let's dig in. One of the impetus, as we said at the top of this, was let's kind of put some of the conversations that we've had independent. There's so many different ways. Like we've talked individually, we've talked collectively, we've talked to other people. We're going to piece all of that together. So the conversations around George Floyd and what's happening in the country and the protests and just the timeline of what's happening now. Let's not go through like the whole timeline, but I think one of the interesting things about all of us is that from a leadership perspective, and I should have said at the top of this, the key things that we're trying to talk about in these conversations is race and leadership. Because for far too often, that has been a taboo topic. People didn't want to touch it. And now we're just going to open the doors on all of that. And we'll talk about more what that means. But for the context of this call, we're all Black CEOs. We all handle that completely different. We responded to it differently. So Michelle, I'm actually going to turn it to you to kind of talk through, because you were actually a true inspiration to me, which I'll explain later. But just kind of walk me through how the last couple of weeks have been and how you specifically in a leadership role have been handling things, and then your identity of being Black in this moment.
Yeah, so it's interesting that I encourage you, because it wasn't as flawless on the inside. The execution was hard. I think I didn't even know about George Floyd's murder when it happened, because I was enjoying the beach, getting some time away, completely unplugged. And my husband didn't tell me because he wanted me to really enjoy that unplugged time. And it wasn't until we were driving home and I started to look at social media and I'm like, what is going on? And I will admit, when I saw it, I hadn't watched the video, but I was seeing what was happening. And what was a little bit shocking was how numb I was. I wasn't mad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't happy. I wasn't nothing. I was just like, oh, there's another one. And it was a numbing feeling. And then when I got home and said, I need to figure out what's going on. Like, this is all over the place. I went to Wikipedia, the best resource out there, and got a dump of what.
Hashtag not real news, but go ahead.
Not real news. Bad. Everything, was in one place. So that's where I went, and I read up what happened, and I watched the video, and it that's when it was just like, again, numbness, but like, here we go again. And so I remember thinking, I want to say something to my staff, because I remember being there and no one saying anything and going to work and no one saying anything about what's happened and how isolating that is. So I reached out to you all to say, hey, did you guys say anything to your staff team? Like, what did you do? Like, are you addressing this? Are we being quiet on this? It's such a push-pull, you know what I mean? Like, we want to be able to express what we're feeling, but then we don't. Because it's taboo, or we don't want to be the Black CEO talking about the Black issues. Yep. And then when we were on that text chain, it was kind of like, I'm going to do it. But I knew I didn't have the capacity to do it. So I text my coach and she was like, okay, send me what you got. So I'm sending her raw, this is what I want to send. And she responded, and then we ended up sending it out. And that was a Friday night. And then you wake up Saturday and the protests are going on heavier in Chicago. And I live in downtown Chicago in a high rise. By the afternoon, the riots were in full swing. And we were watching, police cars being blown up, like right on our block. We were watching, vandalism. We were watching like things get exploded and glass breaking. We watched them try to break into our building. I watched the CVS get looted. And it was just madness. And I have a 2-year-old. He just turned 3, but he was 2 at the time. And every time he jumped when there was an explosion, like my heart sank. And I have a Black husband who went into help mode. He's a veteran, and he ran downstairs to check on our security guards who were by themselves and trying to make sure they had water. And it was just chaotic. And I was angry and mad and drained that we're even in a place has to happen, and I'm watching it front row, and I never experienced that before. I know that a lot of our parents have and other people have, but I had not, and it really hurt. And then the next day, just watching how the city just started to really be deteriorated as this continued across, especially on the south and west sides, and the south side where I'm from, was just heartbreaking. So I said, I'm not going to work on Monday. Like, it's not happening. And our number 2 reached out to me, and he's a white male, and he said, what do you think about closing the office? And I'm like, yeah, I was thinking that, because I'm not about to do it. I can't do it. But I wanted to shrink, right? I wanted to shrink and just climb like in the bed and just sit there with the covers over me and just hug my son and my husband. But I remembered again what it was like to walk into that office and it not be acknowledged. And I said, you know what? I can't do that. Like, I am the CEO. I have 42 employees. I have employees who are literally sitting here while they're, the Walgreens in their backyard is being looted, running through their yard. I have CEO, other colleagues that are going through this. I have to say something whether I want to or not. So again, I go back to that coach and I said, hey, we're going to close tomorrow, but I want to have a dialogue. Can we do a town hall? And she said, absolutely. I got you. I'm there for you. Go get some sleep. I'll work on the agenda and we'll talk in the morning. And that's what she did. And so between her and the number 2, we got together, we pulled it together, and we did that. And then after that, I got fired up like adrenaline, where I'm like, I'm all in. I'm about to go and check everybody that hasn't been checking in on their staff. I mean, I had a list. I hit like the realtor world. That's who I work for. I hit the universities that I'm on a board for. I hit associations I was a part of, like making sure everyone's really checking in and doing what needs to be done and having these tough conversations. And my thought was, I'm going to get a target on my back, but instead it started really creating the conversation. I may still have the target, I don't know, but it drained me. And I was literally just evaporated and working off of fumes. But I just kept pushing myself because I'm like, I can't be the person that doesn't speak, because I remember how much I despised that when it was me.
And Michelle, I want to hone in on that part that you just talked about towards the end of your story. In essence, you didn't have the luxury of looking away or not acting, given your role, given who you are as a Black woman. That is a luxury that all of us don't have. And that is a burden that we carry, and it's tiring. And when we want to let go, we can't let go. And I will say, this is one of the first times for me, I got off the leadership bus. I just did, because it was going off the cliff. I mean, like you, I was walking around my house like a zombie, because that weekend, there was so much to process and I couldn't process it. And I realized, and Donté and Irving know this, you know, I got to a point where normally I would kick in gear like you, Michelle, and rise to the occasion, because I like to work in logic. And this was not logical to me. So it kind of threw me. And I finally had to just sit still for a minute and give myself the grace and the space to figure this out, because I was no good.
You know, that's
I was no good.
Say that say that line one more time. You know, I love it. What is it? You got to do what?
The grace and the space to figure it out. And that's not, I wasn't asking for permission. I just gave myself the grace and the space, because, you know, like I said, we carry the burden of rising to the occasion when necessary. And this time I just couldn't do it. I had nothing in me. I was done. So, and I'm still kind of in that grace and space mode. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to process it. And my leadership has taken a backseat. And thank goodness I have y'all and others in my network. But the one thing I will say is I did step up for other Black professionals, because that week, like many of you, I was texting and getting messages from other people, having phone calls with other Black execs who just didn't know how to rise to the occasion. You know, I was getting stories from people like you, Michelle. You mentioned, you know, previously being in roles where your boss or the CEO wouldn't even acknowledge it. And that week was intense. And I was getting messages from people saying, you will not believe that my CEO didn't even bring this up, didn't even ask me how I'm doing. So then that pissed me off even more, because we've all been there, right? And I'm like, this is still going on. And even if you don't know what to say, at least at a very basic level, show some empathy and some sympathy for your Black employees, if you have any, you know, but that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just at least have the space to just listen, you know. You don't have to say anything, but just listen. I think similar to Michelle, for me, what George Floyd really didn't impact me that much. Seeing his video, what impacted me, or where I even had to cry a little bit, was seeing the video of Ahmaud Arbery. For some reason, that broke me down. Like, and I've seen, you know, I've seen all of this on the news before. So many people being killed by the police, or so many people being shot just, you know, for no reason. So many Black people being shot for no reason. But for some reason, seeing that video just really broke me down. But I've been so programmed to be professional and to just, you know, to keep moving at in a professional place, that I just put it behind me and kept going, kept working. I think that happened around the time when my annual meeting was starting. So, you know, I really had to kind of just say, all right, I gotta, you know, put my game face on and keep going. But some of the past 3 weeks, I think for me, have been extremely heavy, because I have not properly processed or felt like I have been in a space to be open enough to talk with people outside of you all about what's going on. I'm in a space where I'm the only, you know what I mean? Like, I'm the only, you know, I'm the only minority in my organization as far as leadership is concerned. You know, in the organization I work with, I'm the only. And so it's sometimes it's hard to to really find people to relate to in those spaces. And so like I found like I was just bottling everything up inside and just kind of being like, okay, you just got to move forward. You can talk to Shawn, Irving, and Michelle about this. And then it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I just can't, like, I can't hold this anymore. Like, I'm going to scream or have a breakdown if I just don't, like, at least talk, you know, this out with other people. And I felt like my role in the situation and where I wanted to use my anger and sadness to be productive is to start having conversations with my team and even the larger AMC team around what's happening and helping everybody understand why it's happening. So, you know, I had on my team calls for at least 2 weeks, I created space on our team agendas where I was like, okay, let's talk about what's happening. You know, does anybody not understand what's going on? Or does anybody have a different perspective that they want to get out? You know, I wanted to have those conversations because I thought it was important to help people understand who did not understand or who felt like, you know, oh, they wanted to focus on the riots, you know, or people looting. I wanted to help them understand, like, that's not the point of all of this, you know, and those are distractions compared to what the real point and what the real issue is, systemic racism that's happening in this country, you know, and how we, you know, what you're witnessing is just an upheaval and an exhaustion from having to deal with that time and again for Black people. So I felt like that was my place as a leader, and that's where I wanted to step in and kind of say, okay, how do I start having the conversation, the dialogue with people to help them understand this a little better and where they might be able to play a role, you know, in helping us turn this around.
And I commend a good example too, where like, even from a cultural context, I completely understand what you meant, but just for like clarification, like even when you said George Floyd didn't impact me that much, like from a cultural perspective, I understood that meant like, we've seen this so many times, right? You know what I mean? And like, now there's a whole world of people who this is their first experience. And then he's like, what do you mean George Floyd didn't impact you? And I'm like, well, you know, if you've been living in this.
It ain't new.
Yeah. You're desensitized. Yeah.
It ain't new. So that's the part that confused me because I'm like, well, where is all this outrage coming from? Because we can go back 5 years and the outrage should have happened then. That should have been a tipping point. Why now? You know, I don't know if it was like the perfect storm with the pandemic and, you know, unemployment and people have time now.
People had time.
But for me, it was sort of like, this is not new to the Black community. And, you know, unlike Michelle and, you know, Donté, I'm not having those conversations because once again, it's not new and it's not my responsibility to help you understand. There are other resources out there for that. I don't have it in me to now also help you understand or try to provide you with, you know, because if you ask all 4 of us, you're going to get 4 different answers. There are a million different stories from Black people about their experiences living in this country. So I'm not going there.
Yeah, but I guess to push back on that, like if we all take sort of that stance, right? Like then for people that are well-intentioned, they do want, I mean, now, in which we should get into this later, right? Like everyone's now, you need to call racism out and anti-racism and Black Lives Matter and all this. So if we aren't a part of that conversation, then how do things move forward?
Just like we're having this conversation and I'm being 100% right now, I will have this conversation with us. White people need to have that conversation with each other. Mm-hmm. They need to stand on the front lines. They need to step up. They need to make sure that they get uncomfortable. Because look, standing in my own fear, that's not comfortable for me. Mm-hmm. Being vulnerable, that's not comfortable for me, but I'm standing in it. I'm working through it. I got to do what I got to do. So for them, let me say this because it came to me. Instead of questioning, you know, how can I help or what should I do? I want to reframe it. Make a declarative statement and just say, I will be better. That's it. Don't come with questions. Declare it, own it, and do what you need to do.
So I do a little different approach. I come from, I'm here, I'm the safe space, right? Like you can bring your your questions to me. You can bring your I don't know what to say to me. You can bring your does this sound right? Can I say this? You can email me what you think you want to say to somebody, and I'll be like, you know, and I'll work with you there. And the reason I want to be that safe space is because I've seen way too many white people want to help, and then they say one thing, and then they get shut down because it was the wrong thing, and then they don't speak again. And then for me, I need them talking. Like, we're preaching to the choir here. We know this.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing this so that we can get this message out broader. But I need, you know what I mean, the white person that has the racist uncle or father or mother or whatever at home to take that conversation back. And if they're shut down and fearful of speaking, then they're not going to do that. And I think those are the individuals that need to have the dialogue and need to be equipped so that they can change. So I take on that responsibility, and I know that is an individual choice to do. And I know that is I have a lot of friends that are like, I ain't doing it, not today. I get it, but I'll take it. Shawn, I know you're not going to do it. And I look at like Justin Timberlake, who I love Justin Timberlake, sorry. I remember one time he spoke out on Twitter about something. I don't know what it was. He co-signed something that had to do with Black Lives Matter. And everybody like ripped him a new one because like, what'd you do to Jené? Blah, 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 and all this stuff. And then I'm like, well, now he ain't going to say nothing. You know what I mean? And I need the rest of NSYNC or whoever he was with listening, you know, so that he can hear it. And they're not with us. And now they can. So that's kind of why I will take that burden, you know, to an extent. I definitely have the people that call that are on out for themselves that I don't, you know, they're doing it for their own looking good. I got people that want to check a D&I box and say did something. You know who's sincere and who's not. And the people that are sincere, I'll give them that time and I'll be that sounding block for them. So you can call me. Don't call Shawn. You can call me though.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, like, so I had to come to this realization much later. And Michelle, the reason why I reference you as an inspiration, because I had, you know, in the fight or flight response, typically, you know, I've studied journalism, the whole breaking news aspect. I have done events, like you have to do things really quickly. So I've typically like thrived in crisis situations. And the reason why is that I love the fact when you're in crisis, because I'm one of the people that have like 1,000,000,001 ideas. So it's hard to pick one. But when you're in crisis, like, all right, let's do this. Like you got to move. And this situation is one of the first times I can recall in my professional life where I was actually the opposite, Michelle, and I was flight. Like I was the zombie. I was curled up in the bed, watching the news 24, literally curled up in the bed watching the news, and everything happening with the protest and all that, and not really even knowing how. Like when I tell people this, I was literally confused. I think that was the part that was most frustrating, is I couldn't even tell you what I felt. I just felt weird, and my partner was here for the first day. We went down to the protest, and I just wanted to be in a space. Like, and we weren't even close. We were still socially distanced, still COVID-19 happening. So we were far away, but I didn't do anything but just stand there. Like I just wanted to just be there. And that was the closest that I could think to just doing anything. And for me, when I finally processed all of it, I realized that what I was feeling was anger, to the point that Donté was making earlier. We've seen this so many times before. And I realized what was going on was I was overwhelmed by everyone else's reaction, right? And so like, even when you talk about like, it's not my job to tell people or I want to help people, this is the roles that we've assumed all the time, right? No matter what wherever you are on the spectrum, this assumption of having that role, right? Like we've known about it forever. So what was actually overwhelming was now everybody else knew it and they were acknowledging it and coming to me about it or having a conversation, and that was just super overwhelming. Like, oh wait, no, we are just now waking up to like Black Lives Matter. It's it was overwhelming.
I definitely did turn my phone off though. I will say that. Like I did, and I'm just starting to like look at it and respond. Like I'm probably 1,600 emails in because it started to get overwhelming. Like, oh, thank you for sharing, or this and that and this and that. So yeah, I take on that role, but you know, with as much as a working mother and wife can do. with the staff team of 42. So.
I respect what Shawn says, because I mean, in a sense, what I hear you saying, Shawn, is you're protecting your energy. Like, you've dealt with this for so long, you've talked to so many people that it's become exhausting, and to continue doing that is tiring. It is exhausting. I know talking to my team, you know, after those days were over, I was just like, oh my God, like, you know,
and think about it from this perspective, how we've had to learn to navigate this country as a Black person, as well as navigate our professions. We stepped on some landmines along the way, right? And we learned, oops, don't do that again. Let's turn, go another way, or let me figure this out and get some help along the way. And typically we turn to each other for that. And that's my point with white people. You're going to step on the landmine. You're going to say something, you may get cursed out. However, you will learn, ooh, let me not do that again. Let me not say that again. So some of this needs to be part of the growth experience and the learning experience for them as they go through this. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate y'all that are willing to help and uplift and all of that stuff. But to Donté's point, I got nothing.
Hold on. Do you think we could have had this conversation right now that we're happening, which we plan to do share publicly, right? Could we have done this 5 years ago?
We couldn't have did it 5 weeks ago.
No.
No.
Wait, dissect that. You got to dissect that. Why?
For real, because you know what? Like, it's funny because when I found out about the George Floyd murder, and I was looking into all this, and it was maybe a day between that and the rioting and protesting and looting things that were happening, a friend of mine in my impact class from the Urban League texted me and said, I'm curious, like, do you feel like because you're a leader in the spotlight that you can't say anything publicly about what's going on? And I was like, yeah, you know, I do feel like that. Like, there's a consequence to that if I do. You know, I have a huge membership base and everybody doesn't agree. And so, yeah, I do feel that way. And so all of a sudden, and again, I don't know what is different this time. It's okay. You know, now it's okay to have this dialogue. And so for me, I'm cashing in on this, because now we can actually share what we have a conversation about all the time, our whole lives. And that wasn't here 5 weeks ago. 5 months ago. And so I think now that it is here and people are listening, and it's the first time, I guess, like, I actually feel like there might be I have some optimism, you know, because everyone's talking about it and people want to correct it. And I posted how when I was in Wheaton, which is a suburb of Chicago, and it was a Black Lives Matter rally with all white people, which I'm not used to seeing. That's how it was in Seattle all the time. But seeing that in Chicagoland, which is extremely segregated and has some of the most extremely racist views and policies that have been put in place pre my life, that was heartwarming to see. And it brought tears to my eyes, watching that and pulling up to a stop sign and having a white woman yell at me and say, I got you. And it sent chills to me. So I think this might be the time. I don't know. So I'm having all the conversations I can have before they cancel us and say we gotta stop.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Michelle. And I was going to ask the group, because my observation has been that we have what I refer to as our megaphone moment. And how are we using our voices to amplify what's going on? And I know we all have social media presence, and, you know, I'll speak for myself. I manage my brand accordingly. And I typically would not comment on social issues on my social media, because I could do that privately with my peeps. In this instance, that was my way. You know, Irving, you mentioned that you went down to the protest. I'm not a protester. You know, I did something to help protesters, you know, got together with some friends and we took water and snacks down to feed them and make sure they were hydrated. But I immediately shifted to, okay, let me cash in, you know, on the influence that I've built and use my voice to amplify the stuff that's important to me. And it wasn't necessarily about educating. It was more so challenging people to step up to do something, because I felt like everybody has a role in this, whether it's donating money to organizations, whether or not it is pointing people to issues that they may not have even been aware of. how do we amplify that? So that's what I chose to do. And, you know, Irving, specifically for you, you know, there was a post that went viral because it was, I mean, that needs to be framed and like distributed because it was so spot on. And I'm just curious, like your, you know, just your frame of how am I going to craft something that's going to be the most impactful? Because you took a while to really comment on social about everything that was happening. But when you did, my God, it was powerful.
Yeah, I've typically used my social media platform, not necessarily for social, but I've used it to talk about things just beyond, you know, beyond work. And so the post that I wrote really was my therapy, right? Like I was so confused about how I felt because I knew I felt some kind of way, but it wasn't necessarily only because of the murder of George Floyd. And the post basically summarized this, and I think this is what people felt permission to share, is that in this moment, even though it seems like we're at a tipping point and we're advancing, you know, Black causes and diversity, people are really angry right now. And one of the things I said that I was angry about was, why now? Like, what is it about George Floyd that you saw that now it's okay to say Black Lives Matter? And then and it really was the cyclical cycle too, where I was mad at companies. Like every like Black Lives Matter statement I saw, I was furious at because everybody was doing it. I also thought people were treating it like, because it was so soon after COVID, I thought people were treating like COVID, like we're gonna get this racism vaccine, so let's just make those statements real quick, and you know we're gonna wrap this racism up. So that was mad. I was mad at people, you know, people that now were these huge diversity champions that I never saw before, and then I was mad at myself, right? Because I was just like, why did it take the majority? I actually had a conversation with my team. You know, we were talking about social media policies. I think the post that I wrote actually might have been in violation of a social media policy 5 years ago, right? And today, it's with the times, and it doesn't. So I was actually mad at myself because why did it take the majority for me to say something more loudly, right? And then where we talk about systemic racism, we typically frame it in the lens of white people, but we got some of that affects us too, right? And so like this moment, we're silent or we don't say anything. We don't want to be the angry Black person. We don't want to be perceived a certain way, or we're trying to navigate spaces and making genuine friendships. So we dim our light sometimes too. So it was like all of that emotion got wrapped up. And then I think what connected with people, so you know, I come from like a minister family. So I'm always thinking of analogy. And so I think making the analogy, part of what the post did made the analogy of when I think people can relate to health ailments. So if you consistently had a health ailment, you go to the doctor, they tell you everything's fine, right? Until you repeat that process so many times, when you know the shit hits the fan and you do have something wrong, and everything that you said has been wrong, you've been right about, and it's like all of a sudden everybody wants to operate on you. And I think people just connected with that part of it.
That is so true. You know, I think I too have kind of been, I guess, working through that. It feels good to speak out now. It feels good to share these stories. But yeah, you know, like I wasn't always doing that. And it was protecting, you know, yourself, and you're told like, you know, be cool. Don't put the target on your back. You don't want to be seen as someone that's stirring up trouble. Like I've had people say that to me, and it takes away from who you are. So that's a good point. And I, you know, applaud you for saying that, because that is something that I know I'm still wrestling with on who did I need permission from, you know?
That's a word. Okay, we got grace in space, and who do I need permission from? Take notes on this.
Hashtag.
Right.
All right, y'all. So we gonna let's move. We're gonna move on to our next thing of hot topics. This is gonna be our version of hot topics right now. So a huge hot topic in this environment right now is around allyship, right? And allow me to be a little humorous. Hopefully, people will understand this. I was talking to a friend, and I was actually saying, if I was a white person right now, I think I would be confused, Because some things are saying, reach out to your Black friends. Other things are saying, it ain't my problem, don't reach out to me. Some things are saying, check in with your Black employees. The other ones are like, well, why are you singling me out? You checking in with your white employees too? You know, like everything. there's so many. There's so many different conversations around allyship right now that I imagine would be confusing. People don't know how to talk about it. And I think in the context of this, like what I'm really curious about from you all, right, is maybe kind of piecing this out. Like if you're a white person in leadership, right, like from your perspective, what does allyship look like? If you're a, let me get specific because I think this is one of the opportunities. We're always lumped in people of color, right? And I think that's a way to make everything non-white, but we all have our own unique experiences. But for the context of this situation, this is a Black Lives Matter moment, and that's what we're focusing on. So if you're a person of color, non-Black manager, right, what does that allyship look like? And then if you're a Black person, right, what does that kind of look like? And I know those are three different things, but maybe we can pop around a little bit and touch on those. So Donté, what just reactions to that?
So I thought about this when Shawn mentioned, when we were talking about having conversations rather, and, you know, he mentioned people like, you know, stepping on landmines and saying, oh, I won't say that again, or I won't do that again. For me, allyship is thinking about why you said those things or why you did that particular thing, subconsciously or either consciously. So the end goal for me is dismantling systemic racism in our country, right? And I need allies, both other people of color and white people, to help dismantle that. And I think that's the stem and the root of a lot of the things we're seeing today. So, you know, we see the folks, the white people who are putting out statements and they're like, you know, in a mad dash to do this and do that. But I feel like everybody needs to take a step back, and we need to think about this strategically down to, and people, and this goes for everybody. When we think about dismantling systemic racism and being allies in doing that, it comes down to like, what are you doing that is rooted in my oppression as a Black man? Down to who you vote for, local, state,
yes,
on the state level, and in the present, you know, like thinking about those decisions and thinking more broadly than yourself and saying, is this decision I'm making or this action I'm taking, you know, intentionally going to oppress or disadvantage Black people in this country? Because systemic racism has set us up to function in a way that we automatically do that without thinking. White people too. I mean, systemic racism has been set up for white advancement over Black advancement, right? So white people just naturally, you know, and we're all actually indoctrinated into this system where we just naturally and automatically make these decisions thinking oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And it won't, you know, this doesn't impact Black people over here, you know what I mean? When it actually does, when you know, think about it, or when you do more research about it, you know. So allyship, to answer your question, Irving, allyship to me is everybody being more thoughtful and strategic about what they are doing to dismantle systemic racism. And it isn't about a D&I policy or bringing folks to the table. You know what I mean? I said earlier, we were talking, you know, all these people are like, I'm hiring these diversity and inclusion executives, or you look at all
about the committees.
Yeah, exactly. You have all these, you know, you have all these Fortune 500 companies, and the only Black person is a diversity and inclusion executive. And all that says to somebody like me who understands systemic racism is you've invited somebody to the table, but white people still own the table, right? So what I'm trying to get at is let's break down this table and build up a table with more diverse people together so that all of us own this table.
Racially diverse.
Yes, racially diverse. Thank you, Michelle. Racially diverse. So that all of us own this table and not just white people, and we're not just continuing to contribute to a system that we've been indoctrinated to. So allyship is thinking about, you know, what you're doing, the decisions you're making that contribute to the oppression of another race, to me.
Spot on.
Yeah.
So
allyship for me is a little simpler. For me, it starts with just speaking out and supporting. And my executive vice president here at our association, to me, he's the definition of an ally. You know, he wants to understand. He supports even when he may not know exactly what I need. He somehow does. And he speaks out. He uses his platform. He uses his voice. And as I was going through this leadership journey, you know, after everything that transpired, I hit that wall where I'm like, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. And I texted him and said, I'm done. Like, I can't, I'm done. I tapped out. And he picked it up and he took the rest of my meetings for the day, you know what I mean? And really for the week, rest of the week. And so to me, that's allyship. You know, that's someone that can't ever fully understand what you're going through, right? And knows that that's okay, that they don't understand it fully, but wants to do everything that they can to try, and not just understand it, but wants to do everything they can to help and share and use their voice, and not just use their voice with me privately on a text, use their voice at home with their loved ones that may not want them talking, use their voice in a room that they get invited into that we don't, you know, using their voice with their friends when they're making those racist jokes, or, you know, it's just all in jest, and calling them out and saying, hey, you know, that's not cool. And I've had a lot of people that have done that. So I'm really proud of the circle of people that I have around me. I only have a couple that I was giving some side eyes to, which is good in comparison to some other years. But that to me is, for me, in the most simplest form, is allyship. Is taking the time to understand, to learn, and not being silent. Not being silent. And it doesn't mean you have to post on social media. It's don't be silent in your house. Don't let that joke pass. Don't let that friend, you know, post that racist article. That's what it means to me.
Well, let me, I really want to confuse people now, because I want to chime in to say that to me, actually, allyship is silence, but it's complementary, not contradictory. You'll see this in a second, right? Where some of what I'm seeing now is, I'm seeing this from some, you know, this is white friends, colleagues, strangers. It's like a Pandora's box has been opened, and some things that Black people, people of color have been experiencing literally their entire life. Some white people are getting a glimpse of what that feeling feels like, right? On the empathy level. And it's super uncomfortable, right? Like it's super, and I think for many people of color, it is so ingrained in us as just an everyday occurrence that we don't even recognize it all the time anymore. And so I think for some white people, that feeling is uncomfortable, and so there's this immediate reaction to solve it, right? Like, and I think you see this where there's just some people who, and people are coming from a very good-natured place, right? But in essence, it's trying to get rid of that feeling, right? Of kind of having you what is it, the blue red pill in the Matrix, whatever. You took one of those pills,
yeah.
And now you realize Matrix is blown up, and stuff ain't like what you thought it was. And so, what I have seen is, in the effort to be helpful and solve and speak up, right? Like some of what, and this speaks to me, right? Like all I really want to hear in some of these conversations was, you know what? You were right. Systemic racism existed, right? Or you were treated differently because of this. Or I may have said this at one point in time, and then be silent. Don't give me a reason. Don't give me a history. Don't
your Black friends.
Family is, who your friends are, where you went to school,
what strategy.
You know, where you go to church. You know what I mean? And I've had genuine moments like that during all this, where I didn't realize how much I appreciated the silence, because in the times when we have spoken up, it's always been something, like there's always been a reason, there's been an explanation, there's been something. And in these moments when there's been silence, I was like, you know what, that is what I needed. Like just be silent. You don't have to do anything. And actually, y'all, it's okay just to sit in this for a while. Like, we don't, how long has we been dealing with this? Like, we can actually just sit in this for a minute. Like, I just want to sit and just have the comfort of knowing we was right.
Y'all look.
Right.
Yep.
Because you really start thinking, like, is racism real? Like, is it crazy? Do they look at me crazy because of this? Am I crazy how that I walk into the store and somebody look, you know what I mean? Like, you have those moments.
Right.
And so, like, I think allyship is also in this moment, whether it's your employees, your colleagues, or whatever, it's sometimes just saying, like, I see you. I hear you. Like, I believe you. That's it. Shawn.
You know, allyship for me is about action and not just the words. And I experienced this earlier this year, I would say for one of the first times in my life and in my 25 years of association management career. I was at a conference for association CEOs, and maybe 6 or 7 of us were Black. And like most association conferences, there was a reception. It was sponsored by a hotel chain, very well known, and they were hosting next year's meeting. The meeting was going to be in Alabama, not a state that I looked forward to going to. And during the reception, they allotted time for the salesperson to, you know, give a slide presentation, talk about the property. And during the description of the property, she used the word plantation. So all the Black people, we were kind of within eyesight of each other. We're like looking like, is she plantation? And we're like mouthing to each other because we weren't standing near each other. And we all heard the word plantation. And it was used in describing the property as if it was an attribute. You know how it's like, you got beach views. Well, she used it like
it's
plantation. Plantation. So, of course, you know, after she finished and the reception resumed, we started chatting with each other and huddling. And at that point, I was like, I can't deal with this right now. So I continued networking with those that I was sitting at a table with. And then another Black woman came over to me and said, I need you to join me because I'm having a very tense conversation at another table and I need some backup. I need you to kind of come and speak up. So I was like, all right, I'm coming, you know. So we go over to this other table and we were the only 2 Black people at this table, and it was maybe a table of 10. And they had already been discussing what happened. And while people appreciated that the word plantation was used, and we weren't sure if the property was a former plantation or whatever, the word plantation was a trigger. And the others were trying to convince us that it really wasn't that bad and we should rise to the occasion and still show up at this conference next year. And I was pissed off and I used a few curse words because for me, it was about, am I going to spend my money or the organization's resources to go to a place where I don't feel safe and I don't want to feel not safe? You know, you go to conferences and you want to participate. And I was like, there are a few states in this union that I just don't want to go to. Alabama being one, Mississippi being the other, as a Black person. So one woman said to me, well, you should do it for your ancestors. You should show up and just let them know that you're now able to come and participate. And so we had a few choice words with each other. Wow. And then there was conversation about me having a conversation with the salesperson, who's a white woman, to educate her about why her descriptor, the word plantation, was inappropriate. And without hesitation, there was a white man sitting at the table, and he spoke up and he said, wait a minute, why should Shawn, as a Black person, have the responsibility of educating this woman about something that he's affected by? And he said, white people need to do a better job of holding white people accountable. He said, I will have that conversation with her and my message will carry more weight and I'll make sure that she understands. And all I could do was lean back and just say, wow, because that had never happened to me. and it was public. Other people heard him say it. He did not miss a beat. He was very clear. This should not be the responsibility of Black people to always have to educate other white people when they say something or do something that's inappropriate. And I've never experienced anything like that before. And this was February of this year. And he took it a step further. So the night ended. The next day, he followed up with me and let me know the conversation that he had with her and what the outcome was.
That's an ally.
Thank you. That was it. And that's what I'm talking about. There was action. I didn't prompt it. He saw the tenor of the conversation, what was happening. I was a bit stressed. The other Black woman was stressed. We felt defensive because it was sort of like, well, wait a minute. Why do you not understand that we don't want to go to Alabama for this conference after this woman described the property using the word plantation? And it just kind of spiraled from there. But yeah, he stepped up, dealt with it, followed up, closed the loop. I was floored. That's allyship.
Man.
There you have it. All right, final round robin on the hot topic. Being a leader in this moment, no matter what your race is, what's your top advice? Donté.
I think being a leader in this moment for people who are white is right now listening, asking for understanding and just listening. That's it. And as you said, Irving, sitting in it. I think for black leaders and people of color in this moment right now, I think Shawn said, use your voice. You know, now is your opportunity to speak about your experiences and, you know, to even, you know, take a moment to relate to other people, you know, who may be connected to you through what's happening right now.
Yeah.
I say right now it is take a risk, but be comfortable with your risk. Be comfortable that whatever you say, you're not going to go home with that pit in your stomach and waking up like, you know, take the time to think through what the consequences are, because we are not in a post-racial climate and there are some consequences for what we say and do. So as a leader of color, and specifically a Black leader, assess the risk, but take one. It can be a small one and make sure it's worth it for you. For white leaders, I want you to be vocal. I do. I want you to check in with your teams and have those uncomfortable conversations and get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Love that.
It's not mine.
Shawn.
Simple for me. Speak your truth. Period.
No wrong with that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm so glad this is not a panel or something. You know when you feel like you gotta say so. Like I feel like in the end I gotta say something. I'm like, you know what? I ain't saying nothing. Y'all covered it. I ain't got nothing to add. I'm gonna put a period on every 1, 2, 3. Boom. Periods on all that.
Oh man.
Wonderful.
This was good. Yeah.
This was
Good.
awesome.
So, you know, like I said,
feel energized now.
I know,
this is
right?
the first time in a long time that I felt energized.
Well, and I
Thank
think
y'all.
that goes to the point. Like the whole purpose of this and the conversations in our group chats that we've been having, right? I think all of us have individually reflected on even what more can we do in this environment. It doesn't even have to be related to work, right? Like what are we doing personally? You know, how are we giving? How are we impacting our friends? And so that's how this was birthed. That's how Text to Table was birthed. I do have to get a shout out to all of my DC, Virginia folks. Pastor Wesley. This idea was generated from the Alfred Street Baptist Church. He does a Bible study called Can I Push It? Where he looks at issues that are a little controversial in the church. So this was inspired by Can I Push It? But we didn't want to push it by plagiarizing his title. So we got Text to Table.
I tried.
We did what we could do.
We did. But this is one of the things that we talked about, and I'm glad that we did it. And I think, you know, this is literally, we're literally talking about this in real time because we have not talked about what's next from this. We knew we just want to do something quickly, get it up there, but we definitely want to keep this conversation, particularly around race and leadership, going. Add more voices. We'll probably, you know, we all have demanding schedules, so we'll probably mix it up a bit with different people, and we'll take on different roles. But we want to continue to do that. I think we want to solicit when this does get posted, like, what do people want to hear about race and leadership? So we're definitely want to take comments about what are some conversations, and I think the more controversial, the better, because this is the moment that we're in that we need to kind of push it.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is what we can do. You guys have some thoughts on that too. Like, let's just kind of talk about, people can see this real time, how we're thinking about this.
Yeah, and I think it's true for Black people and white people. White people, we want to hear from you. What do you want to hear Black people talk about? What do you have questions about related to this moment, especially in a professional environment? And for our Black colleagues, what you're struggling with? What's still going on in your work environment? You know, how are you navigating? How are you trying to figure things out? You know, send us what you would like to hear other people talk about, because you're not alone.
And I think we're going to you see that we have 4 different perspectives on this, right? We have 4 different approaches. And so none of us are speaking for the Black leader. You know, we're coming at it from 4 different angles. And so I think that's the cool part, that we can all offer kind of what our take is on it. And I'm sure there's people that will comment that they've got a completely different take. And so we just want to keep that dialogue going. We don't want the conversations to end when the protest stops or when CNN turns off the camera. We really want to make this change. And so that's why we are committed to taking these texts to table and having the convo.
Well said. When you said it, I want to say, keep the energy up.
Energy, right?
That is a nice way to conclude. That's a nice way to end it.
Good chatting with y'all.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.